Welcome to my show simply entitled Women Influencers. I am Veronica Malolas, CCIM, founder and CEO of Capstack Commercial, a commercial real estate company serving the greater Orlando area. Today's guest is John Crossman, CCIM, real estate expert, speaker, entrepreneur, best-selling author, coach, podcaster, philanthropist. John and I spoke about his advocacy for women and historically Black colleges and universities, an episode really worth listening to. Please don't forget to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe below. I welcome your comments and please share with someone who can benefit from this podcast. Hi, John. How are you today?
I'm doing great. So nice to see you.
Oh, good to see you. And thank you for gracing our show. I know it's really quite fantastic to have the John Crossman as our guest today.
That guy.
That guy. Let me just jump right in. We're always interested in people's stories. So I'd like for you to tell us how you grew up in your environment and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. I think what people might seem as odd about me is that, I have two big parts of my life. One is commercial real estate. And then I have all these things I'm passionate about. I love working with college students and, issues like mental health and addiction and things like that. So people might think, why is John into these two worlds? And the answer really goes back to my parents. My parents were civil rights leaders, very active. My parents were feminists back when there was issues they were dealing with that thankfully our current generation doesn't have to deal with because of people like my mom and my dad thinks they did. And so I grew up in this household that was well educated. It was community invested, and if there was something on and doing in the news, our household was involved in it. And we did not have a lot of resources. We were kind of living by faith some of the time. And so what that meant for me was that when I got to college, I kind of had this realization that I was from a household that had influence without affluence, and I became a devout capitalist. And so I really wanted to be in a space where I could work hard and get rewarded for that. And as I got into real estate and then I got some level of success, I was always struck by the lack of diversity. And so then I really kind of got involved in that world. And so it's my story of growing up, in sort of working class, blue collar environments, getting to another space, but really staying true to my roots and wanting to be a person that's about bridge building and connecting. And you probably know this, but my dad's nickname was the bridge builder going back to 1970 in the civil rights movement. And there's a bridge in Maitland named after my dad. And that was done because he was a person that got communities together. And we try to do that both in our real estate and the work that we do and helping getting people together.
Wow, that's a pretty awesome beginning. I mean, and really for your parents, I think that's so admirable. How way back then, they were already fighting for the community and for those that clearly did not have an advantage. So thank you for sharing that. Let's talk about college. So you want to talk a little bit about college and all that good stuff, and then maybe how you started in your company, how you really got into the corporate real estate.
Yeah. So first off, my big thing in college was I ran track, and I was a sprinter, and that usually surprises people that I was a sprinter. But funny story is, people have often asked if I was part Black, and I actually got my DNA tested. My mom and I did it together a few years ago, and we'd always thought that my mom's dad was biracial. He was, and I have the Nigerian sprinter gene. So I was passed then, and it was part of my DNA from that side of the family. But also it goes back to like my collegiate experience was predominantly around a group of fellow athletes. All of them were Black but me. And then all 4 years of college, I ran in the FAMU relays, which all the historically Black colleges plus FSU would participate. Mm-hmm. So I had a kind of a different experience. Again, it goes back to my little bit of a complicated background, but that prepared me for being in environments I'm in today, where I'm a trustee at Florida A&M and I'm a trustee at the Bethune-Cookman University, but I have that within me and that connection point. School was hard for me, very hard. I did not know until my 40s that I was dyslexic. And so I just struggled academically. Some people say, oh, I never went to class and I made straight A's. I never skipped class. And when I graduated from college, I graduated with a 2.9 GPA. That is as high as I could get it. I didn't know that I had this issue then. So it was a struggle. But it helped me because when I got into the brokerage business in 1993, you have to work hard, but you also have to be creative. Like, this, like so many deals don't go from A to B, they go from A to 12 to X, Y, like whatever.
Yeah,
And so when you have a
absolutely.
background of hustle and, hey, I can't just memorize this and get an A on the test, I got to figure out a way to do it. That really helped me in my early on in my career. And back then it was a weird time. I did not know anyone else in the industry at that time in their 20s. The next youngest person in my office, I was 22. The next youngest person was 31. And so again, there was zero diversity, even like age. And it was hard, but it helped shape me. And I was very fortunate because a lot of people back then gave me a shot. And I just always tried to be the first guy in, the last guy to leave. And I was actually hired at the Landmarks Group, which got bought by Faison, and a long career there, which got bought by Trimble Crow Company. So I was 13 years in that all those formative years. And then they sold to CBRE right after I left. But that first season going through a mid-sized regional and a national brokerage company was all very, very good for me.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. So did you study real estate in college, or is that not?
No, I did. So I have a bachelor's degree in real estate. Again, very fortunate because the program now is top 5 nationally. We were probably a top 25 then, and now it's just gone crazy well. But it's interesting because I have a degree in real estate, and I still practice my degree. You know how many times you meet people and they say, "Oh, your degree doesn't matter," and I guess sometimes that's true. But what I do every day now, I still use the things I learned when I was a junior in college. And one of my college professors from FSU is still there. Dr. Sermons is still teaching, and he taught me back in '92, and he's still at FSU today, which I'm like, how old is he? I don't understand that math, but a great guy and a great program, and that's been really helpful. And I'll also tell you within that I made a real effort to go back and support FSU early on. And because I did that, the University of Florida was very kind to me, and they've got me involved in stuff, as has UCF, as has FIU. And so that whole collegiate real estate community has been really, really good for me. And I would tell anybody who's out there recruiting, we have some great talent at the universities in the state of Florida. Make sure you get plugged into those programs because they're producing great talent.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And you know what? It's really quite interesting for me because I always tried to figure out why you are always so connected with the historically Black colleges.
Mm-hmm.
And now I understand. So this is great because you've just told us kind of the story and how it all connects and all that good stuff.
Can I share one thing real quick? Would you mind
please.
real quick? This is an important one for me. When my parents, had little churches and around the state of Florida and in Georgia, old school churches have a pulpit, big pulpit, and little pulpit. And big pulpit's the word of God, and little pulpit's like where you announce bake sales, right? And that's a very serious thing. And back in the day, and pastors don't give up their pulpits. When they're in town, they preach, not other people, because it's a position of authority and power.
That's right.
Starting in the 1970s, my dad gave up his pulpit once a year to the president of Bethune-Cookman University. And when my kids ask me, what did Grandma and Grandpa do in the civil rights movement? I'm like, you just don't understand the heavy percentage of white males in America that didn't look at women as equals. They did not look at Blacks as equals. And so my dad, coming into a room and saying, he's in charge, I'm sitting down, or we are now subject to this Black man in an authority position. So for me as a kid, and they also brought in the Bethune-Cookman concert chorale. These were the people I looked up to and admired. And so I knew about Bethune-Cookman and historic Black colleges before I knew about anything else. And, you might imagine my parents got death threats for that stuff. I mean, it was not a popular choice. It was not a choice that was great for their career, but it made impact. And it was one of those steps that made that they were very brave and reaching out there. And, Mary McLeod Bethune being a woman and all those issues and all the great stuff she does, advisor to presidents, that was also part of that movement as well, which I still very much, I keep an autobiography of her on my desk every day. And, we have 2 statues in Capitol, U.S. Capitol from people from our state. And the second one is Mary McLeod Bethune. And when they had her unveiling 2 years ago, I was right there because I wanted to see that and be a part of that history. And she is one of the best representatives of the state of Florida.
Well, that is really amazing how you've given perspective to not only historically what was an impact from your parents, but also moving forward how you have become so tied to Bethune-Cookman and of course the other colleges because of your work in advocating. And what a great segue, John, because I wanted to ask you about influence, and obviously you've already spoken about how you're connected, you're advocating, and all the good stuff, but particularly about women and perhaps even minority women or Black women. I really wanted to kind of uh, hear from you, kind of how
Mhm.
important that is, and what your work has been. And I think that's really important for my audience to actually understand as well.
I have a friend, and her name is Helen Greenspun, and she's a Holocaust survivor. And I got to spend time with her, and I just think she's a just a national treasure. And when I would ask her, how did she survive the Holocaust? You think that's a big question. And she didn't miss a beat. She looked at me. She said, "Good Germans." I said, "What do you mean by that?" And she told me five different stories about how she would have died if German soldiers didn't help her, either feed her food or clearly ignoring her while she stole food, right? And so, we can look at history sometimes as very like black and white, and then we come to realize that there's a lot of heroes that can come out of those situations. And so,
Right.
people who are marginalized need advocacy. Sometimes that comes in a big way, or a politician or some big event, but a lot of times it's small, simple ways, right? And I think that when it comes to the workplace, um, giving women a voice, giving them power, and also being safe. I think that what you say and what you don't say is a big part of it. There is a young woman that is my wife and I have mentored, just outstanding young lady, and she was getting ready to get her master's degree from UCF, and her parents are deceased, and she's in her early 30s, and she had an event. She called me and said they had an award ceremony. She got an award, and they said, "Come down, let's take a picture with your families, all the kids that got awards." And she said she went to the bathroom and cried because she didn't have any family there.
Yeah.
So she said, "John, would you guys come to my graduation?" And we did. All four of us, we went to the graduation and screamed louder than you could possibly imagine.
Ah.
Well, as time has gone by and I've helped her, one of the things that she said to me meant so much. She said, "John, thank you for being a safe man who advocated for her and never, was hitting on her or any kind of thing. Just embracing a very paternal role in that space, right?"
Mm.
And so I think that's a very real thing. I think that we're in a better space than we were in the past. But I think that men being in power and being really thoughtful and intentional about that power is a big deal.
Yeah.
When I hear the word influence, I got asked one time in an RFP if I got by a client, and it was a Fortune 500 company. They asked me if I was a leader in the industry, and that's a tough question because I was like, well, if I say yes, do I look arrogant? Do I say no? Do I look incompetent? And so I had read the definition of leadership is that from a one guy I read about, he said it's anyone who seeks to influence others. And so I said, by that definition, I'm an industry leader because I desire to influence the industry, right?
Mhm.
And so when I'm doing scholarships, we have 12 endowed scholarships across the Southeast, and majority of them are women and minority focused because we're trying to make that influence in it. One of my daughter's favorite books is Pride and Prejudice, and there's a movie called Pride and Prejudice and Zombies that a little twist to the
Yes.
tale. But if you know that book or if you know the movie, what's the plot? The plot is a wealthy man knows he's going to die and he can't leave his real estate to his daughters. So they have to get married so that he can let them have their wealth. Real estate ownership has been used to control minorities and women, for a large part of history. So if we want to help women and minorities, part of that, not all of it, but part of it is real estate education, real estate empowerment. And that is a huge modern blessing that we need to get more attention to.
No, I absolutely agree with you. And in a small way, right? This podcast is actually has that same intention. And that's exactly the reason why once in a while I feature men like you who have played a very big part in advocating for success of women. I've had mentors like, you know him, Robin Webb, Ben
Sure.
Crosby. They have opened doors for me, which has really allowed me to enter into an industry that are predominantly white male.
Mhm.
So I definitely appreciate what you just shared there, because I think that what you just expressed just now really just puts into perspective really the importance of it, and also that you've given sort of a picture of why men in power need to be able to advocate for the disadvantaged. I mean, truly, it's hard. We need men like you in our corner. So thank you for all the work that you do. Speaking of which, I wanted to ask you if there was one piece of advice that you'd like to give our audience, what would that be?
There's two that come to mind if I can have two. The first one is this: we seem to live in a culture that believes I tweet, therefore I am. Right? That just because I go out and I state something that has currency. And what I tell people is that doesn't have currency. Currency has currency. And what I mean by that, we need to get away from the concept of just stating things we believe and instead actually sacrificing, like making a personal sacrifice, not wanting other people to sacrifice, but we make sacrifice to make impact. And
Mhm.
so what I would say to some people is like, hey, maybe one year you don't go on a vacation. And instead, you take that money and endow a scholarship for women at the university you went to, or get a group of people to do that. But be intentional about doing something that's meaningful and meaty and big that can help make a step, right?
Mhm.
With all my scholarships, I always tell people like, don't ever buy me a plaque, don't give me a Christmas gift, donate my scholarships. But what I really want you to do is endow your own, match it. And so we can do more things. Or it could be something else, not to be scholarships, but whatever it is, make sure it's real. The second thing is that I was thinking about this the other day is like, what is my biggest regret in my career? And here's what it would be: too much time in bad relationships and not enough time in good relationships. And that life is short. And when we find people who are really great and wonderful and talented, let's get as much time as we can with them. And then when they're really toxic, limit as much time as possible with them.
Absolutely.
And life's funny. We oftentimes we don't know when it's the last time we're going to have a conversation with somebody. And you've lived enough of a life. I'm sure you've experienced that. We're like, whoa, that person's gone, and maybe I never get a chance to give them a hug or tell them how much they meant to me. And so I think having a real awareness of how limited our lives can be, and really thoughtful about really deep, meaningful relationships.
Wow, I'm just so very touched by what you just said. I think that most people, even though they think these things, they don't necessarily express these things the way that you have just right now. As a matter of fact, I just got inspired because what you just said about perhaps you would start thinking about, maybe if I just saved that money and just gave it to a worthy cause and have an impact,
Mhm.
the reward is not just for that person who's receiving it, but for yourself as well,
That's right.
because you've made a difference in somebody's life, or something like that. But wow, that was really amazing. So I want to just say that I'm so grateful for the time that you spent with me today. But before that, if my audience would like to find you or find your books or
Sure.
maybe some of your podcasts,
Yeah.
tell us how to connect with you.
Very easy. Just Google John Crossman, you'll find me. So Crossmark, and that's CROSSMARC, Crossmark, is my real estate company. So we have a website. You can see all the stuff there. And then Crossman Career Builders, I have a website, I have a YouTube channel. The podcast I have is the Crossman Conversation. And then my book, Career Killers, Career Builders, is all with underneath that company. So I'm a real estate company where I'm doing my work. And I have all those other things that are, promoting the other things that I really value, which is education, mental health awareness, suicide prevention, and things like that. I am accessible. If someone wants to find me, you can find me. And I'm happy to be a resource.
Yes, and you are. And I so appreciate that you are just so responsive and so gracious and just open. And I love that. So thank you again, John,
My
for
pleasure. Thank you.
spending the time. And I wish you all the very best. And boy, was I inspired today. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.